right, we are live.
Hi,
Sandy.
everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of Sapient Advisors Office Hours. Today we're speaking with our friend and visionary, Dave Merwin. Since we personally know 7,000 Daves, we do sometimes refer to him as just Merwin. So just a little bit about Sapient Advisors before we get into it with Dave. We are a comprehensive consulting service, and we are designed to transform your business operations, enhance your strategic decision-making, and drive sustainable growth across various industries. We specialize in product strategy, data lifecycle and sourcing, engineering, architecture, talent development, ML ops, the full spectrum of the SDLC. And we are AI first company, as is Forge AI, which is Dave's new adventure that he's been on. We've worked with him in other capacities, but he's going to talk about his solopreneurship adventure. Mary Beth, if you want to jump on.
Great. Thanks, Sandy. Excited to be here. We're excited to have Dave on the show, a good friend of ours, and just a really talented individual doing so many great things here in product and AI and really pushing the boundaries. So we wanted to share Dave with others and what he's doing and to learn. Dave, first thing, just if you can just go over a little bit about your background, and I think within that also how you rethought things about the agency model and deciding to take Forge in the direction that you're going.
Sure. That was really humiliating introduction. Thank you for all of that. Yeah, I ran my own agency for a while with a partner, and we were focused on healthcare and doing some mostly web app development. And then I ended up working at a really large agency after that. And so I've been on both sides, both the small town, know your neighbor kind of work, and then the large international clients, Fortune 100 kind of work. And after getting let go from the big agency, I'm really excited about the idea of possibly starting my own thing again and having been playing with some of the AI tools and some of the things that I had learned. I realized really quickly that a great deal of what I thought was unique and special about myself was actually not, and had already been captured via the early versions of the AI frontier models. And so that really made me rethink, what do I actually have to contribute? And it really opened up the idea of maybe trying to build an experiment around becoming my own company, if you will. So Company of One. Paul Jarvis is a great author, wrote a book called Company of One. And so thinking through, what does it mean to be on my own and as a company? So instead of thinking myself as a consultant, thinking of myself as a well-equipped company that is backed by AI.
And then I guess just one thing is, how do you get people to see that you are a company and not just a solopreneur?
Yeah, I don't know yet. So part of it is, I think the level of complexity that you can take on and manage will change what that looks like. In some ways, it is semantic. You're behaving as a consultant, but you're also behaving as a producer. And so being able to strategically consult and help people do product development at the same time you're actually building the thing starts to change the paradigm of what's possible. And so it opens up the model of, maybe it's not just about asking someone to take their watch, tell you what time it is, and hand it back to you, that there's this conversation that ends up happening, and then you go do the work. That has led itself to forcing both the client and myself to think differently about A, what we can produce, and B, how we behave together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that kind of rings to when we had our conversation, you talked about DJing, your client work, and the various things you could do in multiple AI projects. Maybe dig into that a little bit more of what this gets you to, let's say, 10x yourself.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out is it 10x or 2x at the moment, but I've done a lot of experimenting with workflow and production. And even right now, I've got an AI that's running in the background. It's just off my computer, off this screen, that's doing a bunch of development for a feature as we speak. So part of what I'm learning is that the product process is a really solid process. So you have your discovery, you're looking for and identifying and documenting what the problem is, and then you're running experiments to come up with the right solution. and then you go build that solution based on the feedback and validation. So that all works really well. And so what I'm finding is that system is driving the production as well. So an engagement typically looks like maybe a Google design sprint or some sort of discovery exercise where we're working together to identify what the actual problem is and working really hard to not get married to the solution yet. And so the idea of documenting that problem, getting consensus on the problem, making sure the stakeholders, everyone has signed off and agrees, yes, this is the problem we're going to go solve. That's just product management. That's not anything unique. What starts to 10x is that the time between experiments, the amount of experiments that you can run at the same time, and how sophisticated those experiments become, both goes up in the level of sophistication and is shortened by the amount of time it takes you to actually deploy and play with those experiments. And in some cases, if you are able to use something like synthetic data, you can actually mock a result if you have really well-defined personas. So inside of a day, you can analyze and play with 4 or 5 different potential solutions and then figure out what you want to invest in when it comes to the production side of things. So that, I think, has forever changed how I will work. And I used to hate to do real-time work with the client unless we were doing a workshop because it was a very controlled, constrained experience. But now I can write code and play with the ideas with the client in the same room, like looking at the screen together. And that's actually become more exciting. It used to be that every time you write and other people are watching you write, you totally mess it up. That's not happening now. So we can experiment together and be on the same page and the client can see what we're working on.
And that would increase your velocity too, to make progress, to get information, to validate it, push on through.
Yeah, and that's why I'm not pushing back, but I'm not ready to commit to the 10x idea. I've tried doing 4x where I'm running 4 different projects at the same time and just DJing back and forth across them. That's too much. My brain ends up getting fried. I have been able to do at a pretty consistent basis 2 different projects at the same time because there's a lag between when you issue what you want to have done and then get it all organized. Then it starts to do the processing. You can move on to another one and do that. But that context switching is difficult. And I'm trying to figure out a way to manage that in a more efficient way.
Yeah, Dave, I just wanted to jump in on the design sprints. And we've had this as well, where we found Miro being able to produce prototypes immediately is really a game changer and has changed how quickly we do them. What are some of the tools and practices that you are now using, having done traditional design sprints versus an AI-enabled one?
So this happened, the first time I did this, it was so much fun. So typically in the design sprint on Thursday, you're working with a team member who's going to go off and build a Figma prototype of the solution that you came to. And it can be a deck, it can be a prototype, whatever. But you're pretty limited because you have this non-persistent data, non-really interactive thing that you then model for users in your evaluation. So you take this prototype, you put it in front of the users, they go back and forth, you collect your feedback, whatever. What I found is that on day 4, instead of building out your Figma prototype, you can actually build multiple prototypes, test with multiple cohorts, and actually use real code and implement actual solutions. So the first time I did this was with a colleague named Ben Ricker. He built out multiple versions of solutions to the problem that we were trying to solve, and we were able to test those individual solutions with users and get feedback on that. So what I've been doing since is building out multiple solutions to the prototype and then testing those against multiple cohorts. So now we're doing cohort evaluations, not really because it's a different thing, but essentially you can get more people to give you feedback based on what you're putting together, and it's in real code. So you could actually, depending on the quality of what you're doing, you can actually roll that into production that much faster if it's successful.
That's really powerful. That's great. What are you finding are some of the easier problems or even the harder problems for you to solve with AI or agents?
So there's this idea of product people, we want to get feedback, as much feedback as we possibly can, as fast as we can. And there's that statement, nothing about me without me. And one of the challenges that we have is that by the time you're able to spin up an instance, get the thing out in front of people and get it tested, it can be a significant amount of work. So one of the things on the speeding up side of things is we've been able to do things like build panels of experts. So you can integrate an agent or a GPT instance that is the collection of personas. And so you're framing this experience to behave based on that collection of that cohort, if you will. And they can look at what you're doing and give you feedback. And there's different ways to integrate it. You can do it if you're writing copy for whatever project, you can have the panel of experts read that copy and give you feedback. When you're working in code, you can use that as one of your steps for your agents to go through. They deploy this new feature to your local system, and then this panel of experts can evaluate it and say, does this do what you needed it to do? Does it meet their needs, et cetera? So that's a really interesting way. Now it's synthetic data. It's not the end all be all, but it's a really significant step towards automating some things and getting feedback quickly. And I've used that quite a bit to change directions based on what we're putting together and avoid relatively embarrassing mistakes. On the more complex side of it, the tools that you can now put together are insane, what you can accomplish by using agentic coordination of multiple agents inside something like Claude Code. And it doesn't have to work for just code. It can also work for content creation and marketing strategy and product strategy, but you have a orchestration agent that manages all these individual pieces that are running either sequentially or in parallel, depending on what you're trying to do. That's been a game changer for me in what I can get done and the amount of time it takes me to get it done. Conversely, or not conversely, incidentally, that means that I really need to have my stuff together on the product side. So I need to make sure that I have the right PRDs. I understand what the requirements are. I understand what the problem is, what the business, all of those things together contribute to the documentation that can then be used by these orchestrators to go out and build the different pieces.
So something there that you said, those product decisions or product points that you need to go and do that strategic product work, that can't be delegated away. You still have to take care of that yourself. Right?
Yeah, there's a couple. Some would assert that you can, and that might be true just in some regard, but I haven't experienced that yet. So I haven't been in an experience where, leading the product process, leading the process by which to discover the problem and evaluate potential solutions. It's definitely sped up with AI and that AI as collaborator, but keeping human in the loop is really crucial for developing the actual solution. So I haven't been able to replicate myself doing that yet. Maybe it's because I haven't asked the right question or I don't know quite how to do it yet, but I do enjoy the fact that I still have to be involved in my experience and my bias in that domain is helping to drive what we end up. That makes sense.
And then when you say like you've done with the agents and the synthetic data, have you seen like when you then take that to a real customer, a real client for review, does it stays in alignment? Is there a lot of variation there, or does it help strengthen that prototype that you go to share? Like, how are you finding that?
That's a really good question. I'm finding that because I'm establishing some rules and some guidelines to begin with, that it pretty much stays in alignment. And so I can use the panel of experts to evaluate what we're doing, tweak that stuff, and then take it to the client for review. And then obviously we would launch and do further testing, et cetera. So I find that it does persist alignment across the work. It also has been really great for calling me on my own assumptions and bias. So if I, as a person who's been doing this for a while, I've got my tool belt of things I like to use, and I often have missed things. And this kind of approach of using synthetic data to remove bias has been really helpful. So yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I've found it to keep me in check and make sure the work that I'm doing is pretty good, but then also helps me move the project forward faster.
We could stick on tools for a minute because I know you've been pioneering and we've had many conversations where, we'll actually open the kimono and kind of share. What are the tools that you're favoring? And you should definitely share your approach to vetting these tools. I think that would help a lot of people who are really struggling with seeing how many new tools come out and they're struggling to keep up.
Yeah, it's exhausting. So the first thing I would say is don't bother. It's so challenging to keep up with all of the different nuance. There's at least a half dozen really good Gen AI for code, Gen AI for product tools right now. They do fall apart when you try to scale or go to production. And part of that is the tool itself and what it's able to do, but it's also part of that is the people not knowing how to build products that need to be able to scale and that are secure and all that stuff. So I personally recommend building your own test suite and then going out and testing these tools as you gain experience and learn. For instance, I have a single PRD, product PRD, that I use when I go to test a new tool. And if I can get satisfactory results from that PRD that I submit to the tool, then I will decide whether or not I want to include that in my workflow. And I'm pretty ruthless about it. So if I submit the PRD, so say to XYZ product, and it comes back and it's 90% of the way there, I still won't use it, because that last 10% slows you down so much that it's almost useless as far as execution. Because if the tools are going to live up to the hype, they need to be able to take you from ideation to deployment pretty effortless. I've been building applications for a long time, so I understand the pieces that are involved. And if I get stuck, then I don't know that it's worth the time to try to figure out how to include that. So I've pretty much committed at this point to using Claude Code and the Anthropic products because I've gotten the best results out of them. I pay the $200 a month for access to their highest level tiers of access, et cetera. And doing that, committing to that, both financially and from a process standpoint, has helped me understand and discover the nuance of what is available to me and building a workflow that will sustain and support the products that I'm trying to build. So I would encourage you, when there's 1,000 things coming at you, it feels like there's the temptation to experiment with all of these things, but the problem is most of them won't get you all the way yet. And so committing to a thing that you're finding works is probably more useful than trying to chase whatever new and flashy thing is out there.
Yeah, I think that's been our experience too, Mary Beth, of just certain tools, you can only get so far with them. I would say a couple exceptions. I love Gamma, as it's been great of generating PowerPoints and some images. And obviously Canva, I think, is a leader right now.
I think the one thing that Dave, you're hitting on with these tools is the problem first, but also the ability, because of these agents and AI, you'll be able to build your own personal customized software, like personalization of the software, which is a trend that folks have been talking about. And I know I sit on these WhatsApp groups and stuff, and everyone's talking about the tools, and it's like a free for all. But you're saying, no, don't do that. Stay here, and you can personalize it to your business, whether you're a product person, whether you're a marketer or sales, whatever your company is that you're doing.
Yeah. So that's a great point. So I'm building at this point my own communication tools, my own project tracking tools, my own business operations tools. And they're all really specifically tailored to what I'm trying to do as a solopreneur. Back to your question about company of one, the idea is to get to a place where I'm delivering the level of service that an agency would deliver, because I've been able to build my own tools that augment the work that I do. And these tools that I'm using, specifically Claude Code and then Cursor, allow me to build these applications, launch new features, tweak things based on feedback in a really condensed amount of time. And they're completely custom tailored to myself. And the infrastructure is so incredibly cheap. So being able to spin up an instance and put it on a server somewhere so that I can interact with it costs me anywhere from $8 to $20 a month, as opposed to potentially paying hundreds of dollars a month for a new service that does only XYZ and only solves 80% of the problems that I'm trying to solve. Yeah, having the toolkit is really important for being able to solve these problems. There's other great tools, like if you're not a developer, N8N is fantastic. It's a really great tool for building automation workflows and processing data. And they've got a really sophisticated and deep ecosystem that allows you to do some really interesting interesting automation and problem solving.
Yeah, that I think is a great point to share with people so that they know that you could go and eventually customize this to yourself. And then there's features you're not going to even use, and then there's things they're not going to have. And you can basically have what you need. I firmly believe that's going to be a big trend. But I'm going to go to the question that we have. And the question from the audience is, what do you think of the capable orchestrators of AI agents? Are the ones out there? They're still works in progress.
Yeah. So great question. The orchestrators themselves, if we're talking about the same thing, there's this idea, it's called the BMAD method. And I cannot remember what the acronym stands for, but if you look for it on YouTube, you'll find the channel. The orchestrator in there these are just files, right? So they're markdown files that have a description of what the service is supposed to do. So when you get in there and you start playing with how they work, you can custom tailor those to your own workflow, and what you're trying to accomplish, and the things, maybe the specific requirements that you have. So I think those are a great place to start, the projects that have been released open source, specifically the BMAD one, but then you would custom tailor it to yourself. And for me, I use a very specific development stack. I've got the toolkits that I know and can rely on. It's how I can evaluate whether or not what I'm doing is any good. And so I've custom tailored the orchestrator to that so that I can rely on when it's doing its deal and it's moving stuff back and forth and moving the product forward, that I'm getting a predictable result that I desire. So I'm less excited about just jumping in and using an orchestrator that I don't know much about. For instance, name your favorite library. If I don't know it, that makes me nervous just from an ops person. I would not want to release that kind of thing into production because I don't actually know what the security risks are. I don't know where I'm going to get stuck with a bandwidth thing that I didn't know anything about. Yeah, I custom tailor it to myself regardless of where it starts from. But the BMAD project, it's both on GitHub and the videos are on YouTube, is a great place to start. And then you just take it from there.
You know what we'll do is we'll follow up with you, Dave, after this to get the links to that, and we can send them out to folks because I'm sure they'll be interested to learn more.
Sure.
Yeah, great idea. So Dave, how are you balancing out all of your client delivery with your personal learning and experimentation? I think you stick out for me as somebody who's probably done the most research into the tools that are constantly going by us, right? So how are you balancing that right now?
I've had to come up with some really hard rules for myself. I did go through a phase where I was like, I gotta learn everything I possibly can, get this all, I need to get my head wrapped around it as fast as I possibly can. And I was getting migraines, I was losing sleep. It was not healthy. And so I ended up coming up with some sort of ground rules for how I'm going to operate, and then being happy with that. Those are the ground rules. I'll give credit where credit's due. Again, in Paul Jarvis's book, Company of One, he asked some fundamental questions about growth and what you need to grow. And while that's not really what we're talking about, it does have some impact on my own thinking. So I have to be comfortable with the fact that I'm not going to know everything and that I am going to miss out on some incredible innovation. And the hope is eventually I'll hear about it. So I've developed these rules for life for myself. Like, I don't work past 6 o'clock. I found that when I do start to work past 6 o'clock, that's when it starts to affect my vision. We know from research that you need time to process. You need time, defocus time, so that your brain can process everything that's come in and wrestle with it. So no work after 6 o'clock, no work on the weekends. I scale the amount of work that I will bill for per week based on a revenue goal. And then I leave time for operations and being able to take care of the business, if you will, outside of that. And I make commitments to specific tools until it absolutely won't do the job. That way I'm learning the best that I can about that tool. And I've really have deep dives. And so I can really understand what's going on. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but there's something really wonderful about closing the laptop at 6 and going off and doing something else. I've literally woken up the next morning with like, that's how I have to do it. And one morning I had this whole system come to me, right? As soon as I woke up, and I was so excited to get back to work. I don't know that I would have gotten there if I didn't allow some downtime or down space.
Yeah.
The other thing is I've made a commitment to 3 nights a week. I don't consume any media. So I just read books, spend time in the shop, go for a walk with my wife. But I found that to be really important too, because otherwise I love to scroll. I love looking at new articles, new ideas, what have you. And I think that's just like, it's just a great way to get sucked into your brain rotting. So yeah, we go old school 3 nights a week, which has been really helpful.
That's amazing. I love that. And we will get into, I think, some health and wellness questions, but I did want to just check, what would your suggestion be? Because I think we're in a different place, but like the guy who's sitting in the full-time job right now and he's watching everything go by, AI is like every second there's a new. What are your recommendations for that guy? He's definitely working till 6. Is he?
Yeah.
Or gal? How are we? What's their best way to stay on top of things without all the burnout and craziness that you just mentioned?
Yeah, first of all, I totally empathize, especially when the news cycle is everyone's going to lose their job. My recommendation for that individual is to identify a problem that they personally are struggling with in their own workflow, their own job, and trying to figure out how to solve that problem with AI. There's some really great articles on how to minimize the scope of what you're trying to investigate, and then using that minimization to identify tools that will solve that specific problem, and then documenting the hell out of what you're learning along the way, and then ignoring everything else. So just focus on that one problem, figure out over the course of a month how you're going to solve that problem, run some experiments on different potential solutions, identify the one that works best, and then roll that into your workflow. And then the next month you identify another problem. And so you slowly start to work across the different things that cause issues in your work and creating AI powered solutions for them. That is way more productive than an hour. I did try an hour a day. I'm just going to read the news, and I'm just going to there's some great services that try to sum everything up on a daily basis. But by the 3rd or 4th week, I couldn't even remember I had no idea what was happening anymore. It was just noise. And so for me personally, committing to specific things and learning and diving deep on those has been way more.
I like that. I like that you're tying it back to something practical. It could be a real work problem. It could be a real life problem. I actually met somebody who was trying to transition into a new career. She's like, I'm an English teacher. How can I go teach language? I'm like, ask ChatGPT. She had never even thought about it. It was like, run your resume through there and put a prompt in asking how you could get there. So it's been really interesting to see how it's impacting life as well. When you do have that question of burnout come up, like how do you know when you're veering into the unhealthy territory, and like what sort of resets you?
Me, it's my sleep is the first indicator. If I'm not sleeping well, I'm getting close. And then so I need to figure out why that's happening. Is it an anxiety thing? Is it an unsolved problem? And am I becoming obsessed with something? And then addressing it is getting away. Like the only way I have found with being able to deal with that is putting a hard stop in. There's no half measure. You stop and you go do something else. So for me, it's that 6 o'clock hard time. It's a commitment to be, I know this sounds cliche, but it's a commitment to being in the gym. It's a commitment to being outside. It's a commitment to not doing the thing that is causing you to obsess. That's the only way I've been able to figure out how to get away from it and to stay out of burnout. I'm really excited about all of this, and I'm really excited about the opportunity that this provides. So I want to be here around long enough to see it actually work. The tools we're using right now are the worst that they'll ever be. And so if you keep that in mind, then the idea is we want to stay around and stay engaged and excited and active, because that's a really important component. And so doing everything you can to step back and step away on a regular basis is super important, I think.
I agree.
I remember we spoke, you talked about it stepping away to free your mind and all that. And then I think the other thing is that I hear is that you, like, not getting caught up in all the chaos, it actually makes it easier for you to focus so that you're probably more efficient or you get more done than if you were running all around.
I think so. That's been my personal experience, is that I did for a time try to use multiple different tools to do different things and running them A/B against each other and all that. But the end of the day, if I had spent that time just committed to a specific tool set and learning how to use that well, it would have been way more productive, because as soon as I did make that switch, and I hemmed and hawed quite a bit. I was like, in Cursor, you have the ability to switch between LLMs. And so I was comparing the output of those different LLMs against each other, which is still a good practice if you're getting stuck with something. But by committing to Claude Code and really getting into and figuring out how to make that work, I believe I've become a lot more efficient. And I know, because I'm producing stuff at a rate that I never would have been able to produce before.
Yeah. Wow.
That's it. It's exciting. Yeah, I think it just opens up the doors. And I think we were just saying, I think I remember saying to you, like, I don't pay attention as much as I used to either. And I just go on to ChatGPT or Gemini or one of them. And I go, what tools do I need to use for this issue or problem, or how could I do it? I don't have to go do my research or ask somebody. I just go right there, and there it is.
Yeah. I don't know this to be true, but I suspect that most of what we struggle with when it comes to this phonetic chaos is more about us and about FOMO than it is about actually trying to find a solution. There's a little bit of like neurotic comfort in, I'm trying to find the new thing. I'm trying to find the thing that's going to solve the problem. Like, I'm on a quest. And the reality is, like, you're still not solving the problem. Like, you're just spinning up, and taking the time to commit and actually solve the problem, I think, is a way more productive.
And I don't know about you, but just it goes back to the clients and doing that work in the discovery. I think we find sometimes clients go, I just want to go and build. Why do we have to do all this? No, that doesn't go away. Like, how do you handle that with people? Like, you still needed to do the discovery work. You still need to do the strategy. Yes, the tools are going to help us, but that's not
so it. I will say I was hoping for, so I'm an art school dropout, right? And I was a painter, and I loved that creative process. I used to do these gigantic canvases and really loved like just getting in there and getting to the work. And so that's what I was hoping for 2 years ago when we started on this journey, that I was going to be able to engage with this AI and we were going to be able to just go crazy and build stuff. That is not what's happening at all. When it comes to building products, we need to have documentation better than it's ever been. We need to be much more concise, much more declarative. We need to really have our stuff together when it comes to PRDs, requirements, use cases. Like, all of that stuff has to be way better documented than it used to be. You used to be able to get away with some sort of iffy requirements and squishy stuff. You could negotiate it and figure it out. I don't think that's true anymore. If we're going to be able to use AI to 10x our work, the documentation has to be insanely good.
And there's really no excuse for it to not be anymore. It's
right.
Time
it really is.
Go ahead.
But going on that thread, can you explain to the audience, some are not as advanced in this whole thing, of why that documentation and why all that is important up front, even more so now with AI? It's not less, but it's more.
Yeah, so there's this idea that context now is more important than your ability to prompt. So the content and the tooling that you give the AI to make its own decisions and act on your behalf is way more important than your ability to communicate to the AI what you want. So if that's true, and hopefully I defined that right, someone call me out if I didn't, but what you want is to provide the AI an evaluative structure by which it can take your request, do the work, and then evaluate for itself, did I get this right? Because otherwise you're constantly married in a way that is prohibitive, or not prohibitive, but not as productive, right? So for example, if you have a half-assed PRD that you send to the AI and are like, hey, I want this, the AI will diligently do the work and produce something for you, but what you get back is something you're going to have to keep iterating on in order to get it to be to fill the gap of what you didn't communicate to it. So if you take the time to do a well-defined, what's your acceptance criteria, what is the problem you're trying to solve, do the work to create a really solid piece of documentation, the AI can use that as the evaluative structure in order to present you with something that is more in line with what you're hoping to accomplish. Yeah. So really it's like having a great contract, right? If you have a great contract with a vendor or with a client, that really helps solve a lot of the communication problems before they get gnarly. If you have a terrible contract, then there's all kinds of wiggle room and you don't know where you're going to end up eventually. And when stuff starts to go sideways, you don't have a structure by which to evaluate it going sideways. And I know we're talking about, like, in this instance, we're talking about digital products, but I think it's also true of things like content. And if you're doing anything in any world that has compliance, you got to remember that these compliance structures, HIPAA compliance or PCI or what have you, these structures are very complex and deep. And so if you're not providing a way for the AI to understand that's an evaluation that it needs to pass, you could potentially introduce security issues or ways that you will not be in compliance or things that you didn't even think about because you're not taking the time to do a really detailed and quality job. That makes sense.
Yeah, I'm glad you explained that, because we have found, especially, and I think it's great, I always say this, that the non-technical founders now can create these companies that they couldn't before and all that. But sometimes when we engage, it's, why do we have to do all that? We shouldn't have to do all that. And so we have AI. It's, no, it doesn't take all that away. We still need to do it. Or we were even talking to someone recently. They have a client who wants to do AI, a large company. They're like, we don't want to go through all this. We just make a plan. It's, oh my gosh, still those basics don't change. And it's very interesting to try to educate people about it, that it's even more important. And there's something missing there for folks.
Yeah. I wish it wasn't true. I hate the documentation. But I do love the ability to create a set of requirements that the AI has to operate around. That's been really helpful.
I'm going to say this one maybe wasn't an AI problem. We've always had an issue with getting the solid documentation, just as a longtime program manager.
Yeah.
We'll put that out there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would also add to this, just the UX would be a lot tighter, and the QA team, I think, would appreciate having this tight documentation, be able to generate use cases and have some really very tight UX requirements as well.
Yeah. If you go back to the BMAD method and the idea of the orchestrator, you can actually build your agents that are going to work on this for you. One of them, or a couple of them even, like I've got multiples that are doing multiple testing. You have an agent that writes the code, and then you have multiple agents that use your documentation to evaluate whether or not the coding agent did a good job. And so inside those agents, you have your own team. This kind of goes back to that company question. So I have an agentic team that is doing all of this work, and it's based on all of those different principles. And so the documentation just makes sense, right? If you have a product PRD that you would have used with your team in order to evaluate what you're working on, all the different pieces, and all the way down to QA, that's still applicable when you're using agents, at least as we can think about it now, or as humans are able to think. I'm sure there's something else we haven't figured out yet that's totally different, but for now, that's what seems to work.
All right. What skills do you believe that AI will never fully replace?
I like to think that one of them is curiosity. So we've definitely, one of the dangers is that if you have the answer to everything at your fingertips, I've seen this happen to people where there's the potential to say, just let the AI solve the problem for you. Don't stay curious. Don't continue to do anything. Don't figure out like how this could work as a product or what's important about it or what are some other alternatives. And so I think that's a dangerous idea to get into. And so I would suggest that staying curious is really important. Asking more questions, going further, seeing what else can happen, what else can you accomplish, what else can you build? What if I ask it to actually build me a physical product? What would happen? And so experimenting with those different ideas, I think, is really important, curiosity. And I think the other thing is taste. Again, as an art school dropout, I love the idea of taste. I don't know that I think my wife would argue that I don't have any. The idea is that we need to be able to evaluate and look at something and go, that's crap and that's not. And here's why. Because as we've seen, all of these different things are starting to, if we thought it was a problem before, like it's becoming even more of a problem now, where we're constantly being barraged by just half-assed BS that doesn't make any sense and is terrible to look at. And so developing a sense of taste and being able to look at something and evaluate it is super important. And I think the one other thing, the one I've been wrestling with a little bit too, and I've been talking to folks about, is learning how to manage. If you're managing AI agents, but you still need to manage them. Like you need to understand where they go, what your expectations are, how do you correct them, how do you learn from that whole experience. I would say curiosity, developing your taste, and learning how to manage are 3 really important skills, at least for the next 5 years.
And my personal is always communication, which some disagree with, but I'm going to put it out there. So the other part of that question is, which skills do you think will lose faster than we expect?
I think what we thought about unique, that's a great question. I think there's 2 things. The first one is what we thought was unique about what makes us great workers, I think is going to go away. I think the skill we hadn't identified as what actually makes us great will bubble to the surface. So these underlying components about who we are is what will make us great makers or contributors or creators going forward. I know at least I've had the experience where I was like, oh, that's way better than what I would have come up with. Being so precious about the thing that we think makes us great, I think it's going to go away. And I think the other thing I think is going to go away is our understanding of how things are supposed to work. For instance, as a developer, I spent my entire career investing in a specific platform. And that was great. I was able to build my career around it. It took me very far. But as I move into this new season, I'm finding that's important only as an evaluative structure, not as a actual contributor anymore. And so I'm beginning to wonder if I need to think differently about, it's not that I'm a developer, it's that I'm a just creator, period, or a maker, period. And that the methodology by which I do the making is not as important anymore. And so my specific skill in doing a specific kinds of thing and understanding a specific library is less important than being able to look at a thing, again, back to taste and saying, that doesn't work, that's not good, and knowing how to correctly communicate it and clarify it. It's all in flux though. So that's what I think.
Creative differences. Yeah.
I guess with the whole thing with taste, right? And then you're not still having to do that development, or you're not and people see, oh, I can do no code and make up a prototype or whatever it may be, but they don't understand how AI works and LLMs, and that it's going to be the same or maybe generic. How do people develop taste with all this happening, right? Like we did that work, right, in our careers. So we've developed that taste, right? How do we do that? Like this next generation is what I think about.
So I don't know if this is the best answer, but this is what I'm trying to do. I think there's 4 things. The first one is go learn an ancient thing, like jewelry making or furniture making or like some other ancient physical skill. There's hundreds, if not thousands of years of documentation of what good work looks like. Go invest in that, go play with it, go figure out how to make stuff. The second one is go to museums. Even if you have no idea what you're looking at, go to museums. Be surrounded by things that are done well, that were created with the best of what is possible for a human to create for that thing. The third thing is go buy a record player and start buying records. The record album art is incredible. The layout, all of that stuff. Courtney Stubbert, my good friend here in town, he inspired me on that. And that's been a huge thing, to put a record on, look at the art and listen to the music. That's a great way to develop taste. And the fourth one is go get comic books. I know this sounds silly, but looking at someone who's trying to communicate and is doing it in a medium that has really bizarre and interesting constraints on the experience is a really neat way to understand how to develop something that's done well. And the more you get into it, the more you can learn and understand what high quality execution can look like.
I like it. All right. Museums.
It's generated by us. If we're not filling that well of curiosity and creativity, then what are we generating? It's going to be a loop, right? So
I forget that, I have to look up who said this, but we are all LLMs. if you think about it. Like we're very small, but we've taken in our learning and we regurgitate what we think, right? And so the more input we have, the better LLM we will be ourselves. And so I think that's an interesting idea as we think about how am I going to develop and grow as a person in this new experience. I think it's intaking high quality things. And thankfully, we get the ability to make decisions about what we're going to ingest. And I think that can inform what our output is and our opinion about things.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. I think we're getting towards the end. I don't think we have too many more questions, but I think we do have our question we ask every week or every month, which is what's one recent podcast, book, thinker, anything who's influenced your approach to AI and solo work recently or forever?
So there's a couple. The Lenny's podcast is really great. He's fantastic. He interviews product people, product leaders, and I've learned a crap ton from him just in the thinking structure.
Big fan.
Yeah, he's really great. The Neuron is a great newsletter. They're like funny and kitschy, and they've got cats everywhere and all that stuff. But the content's really good. They've got some really deep stuff. And then as far as like framing a theoretical model of how to operate as a small team or as a business that's going to grow beyond and do things bigger than what they're actually doing, Every is really good. Every.to. They have a newsletter, and then they do, if you subscribe, they have products that they release to that community, a neat model for revenue. And then they're pretty transparent about what they're working on, how they're doing it, what they're learning, all that stuff. So those are three really good ones. Lenny's, the Neuron, and Every.to.
Amazing. I already gave you a shout out in the first episode, so I'm going to shout out Mary Beth. You just launched your new Substack as well, so everyone make sure you go follow that and learn.
So yeah, Christine is going to drop the link in our comments. It's called the strategy signal. So really how to go and like spot trends and take that signal and turn it into a strategy and multiply it into growth for your company. So everything data, AI, and tech. And plus I do also include write-ups also about our LinkedIn lives and events and some frameworks. So thank you, Sandy. Let's see. And then we want to thank Dave for being on here, spending the time with us. But before we wrap, we also want to just tell people about our next month episode. We will be having, that's going to be number 4. That'll be on October 16th at noon with Lawrence Patricio, who is the partner and head of growth at Neuralseek, which is a low-code, no-code AI agentic platform. Easily plug and play. Our whole team is actually getting certified on it, actually. So we're really excited about them. Also, another thing that we just love about the Neuralseek story is how they got started coming out of IBM Cloud. And also they have all this governance and compliance that is so important to regulated industries, as Dave talked about earlier. And that's one of the things that we really like what they're doing there. So we're excited to have Lawrence on next month, and we'll see everyone then. Also, Dave, how can people contact you if they wanted to contact you after the show? We'd love to ask people how they would like to be contacted as well.
You can just davemerwin.substack.com. That's where I do most of my writing and interactions and all that stuff. And then you can just follow me on LinkedIn, Dave Merwin.
Okay. We will make sure to include that information as well. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dave, for taking the time. This has been wonderful. And Sandy, thank you, my wonderful partner in crime.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Dave.
You.